It's Monday, the 28th of November 2022, and Councillor Simon will be chairing today's meeting. Just to make you aware, today's meeting will be recorded. Can I ask you please to ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting? Would members, officers and attendees who are present in the chamber today please use your microphones when speaking? When not speaking, can I ask that you ensure your microphone is switched to mute? Can the same be applied to those who are joining us virtually? If you have any questions, please raise your hand both virtually and present here today. First item is Chair's announcements, which I do not have any of. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
I see no hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Therefore, we will move on to agenda item 3. Agenda item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting, which are found on pages 3 to 6 of the agenda pack and are here for noting and as an accurate account. Please can I have a proposer and a seconder?
I'll propose, Chair, Councillor Ken Phillips.
I'm happy to second Councillor James Henton.
Okay, thank you very much, both. We now move on to agenda item 4, which is the annual equalities in employment report. The report is on pages 7 to 44 of the circulated agenda pack and is here for decision. Diane to my left is going to take this one. Diane, please.
I've got nothing further to add, Chair, than the report, but happy to take any questions. Okay,
thank you very much. Does anybody? Yes, we've got some indications for questions against this one, I believe. We've got some hands up there. So we'll go to the first one and in order. We'll go to Councillor Stephanie Grimshaw. Stephanie, please.
Just want to check, is this the right forum to raise questions on the report itself, or is it just in terms of the report going out?
No, happy to take any questions on the report itself.
Okay, so I had 3 kind of main questions. I noticed throughout the report there was kind of low engagement on employees self-declaring, and I had a look at previous reports, and that's something that we have had quite, a few times, and I think it happens across the board. Is there anything that's being done to encourage employees to engage with the surveys that are being done?
Yes, Diane, if you want to take that, please.
Well, it is non-mandatory, all the information that we gather. We have, over the years, tried to encourage people to do it. First of all, we had the employee portal, and now for a year we've had a new system called iTrent. What we're hoping, because it's easier to access iTrent, to update your details, and everybody accesses it to see their pay slip, we're hoping that on that basis that people will update their details more regularly. People do tend to update it when they apply into the council, so that when they fill in the application form, although it says it's not mandatory, people tend to do it anyway. But there are certain things we can do to encourage people to fill in this data and keep it up to date, such as putting messages on the system. And that's what we're planning to do going forward to kind of increase the engagement.
Is that okay, Stephanie? Would you like to come back?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I have got my 2 other questions, if that's okay. The second question was, I noticed there was quite a bigger gender pay gap when we were looking at specifically schools. Is there a particular reason for that you're aware of?
The only reason is there is a lot of females employed in schools, and they're on the lower level roles rather than in the higher level roles. So that's really the main reason for the gender pay, the difference in the gender pay gap.
Okay, and then basically off the back of that question, and hopefully it might resolve some of the gender pay gap issues, I noticed on the report, and maybe I missed it, there wasn't any kind of analysis done on what other protected characteristics, including gender, are applying for higher roles. I think it would be interesting to get some data on who's applying for the higher paid roles, because then we can do an analysis on, you know, do we need to be doing anything with the job adverts, where we're placing them, because I know where you place job adverts can have a huge impact on the diversity of candidates. So I was just wondering, for the next time round, would it be possible to get a report on the actual applications themselves, and kind of, do you know what I'm trying to say, in terms of, have we got diverse candidates in the higher roles versus the lower roles and things like that?
Yeah, so what we've got here is the number of males and females overall. So, and what you mean in the higher roles from a certain level, is it, that information?
Yeah, so in terms of, you know, above a certain pay grade, let's say, for example, the diversity of applications for those roles, both in schools and outside of schools.
We can get that information. This report is produced in line with the Public Sector Equality Duty. So the reason why it's not in this report is because there isn't any requirement to report it, but that's not a reason for us not to put it in next year's report. And I'm happy to make a note of that and include that in next year's report.
Yeah, brilliant. If we could do that as an action point from this committee, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is that it, Stephanie? Yeah, if you can pop your hand down, we move on to the next one then, who's indicated to speak is Councillor Ken Phillips. Ken, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. Firstly, on page 26, we seem to have a relatively low level of LGBT plus employees, or those who are identifying as such, and a very high level of prefer not to say. Is that in line with averages in other organisations, or should we be concerned that there may be an issue there where people are employees don't feel able to be open about their sexuality?
Diane, please, again.
I really don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. As I said earlier, it isn't mandatory for people to fill in these details, and it's not mandatory in other organisations. I'm not aware whether there's any difference in other organisations that they get a higher rate. You know, it might be that you know, we don't have a lot of people with the protected characteristics in this organisation. It might be that they prefer not to say, but because this information isn't mandatory, it's hard to know. I'm happy to have a look at other organisations' annual equalities reports to see if they got the similar issue and report back to you, Councillor Phillips.
I think it might be a good idea to do that, because, I mean, we're looking at a report and producing the report is mandatory and all the rest of it. But the point of doing that is to see whether there's any indication that we might have any, you know, cultural issues within the organisation that we need to take steps to address. So that was my first question. The second question was with reference to page 38 and the number of employees who've been taking training. And the numbers on the first two courses, Equalities in the Workplace and Unconscious Bias, are notably low, and I find that quite worrying. The second of those particularly concerning, unless everybody's already taken the course and didn't need to take it this year, but that's a vitally important subject for anybody who's public facing or decision making, and you know, that from everybody from the front desk to the councillors ourselves. What do we do? Has that been noted, and what, if anything, are we proposing to do about it?
Yeah, it has been noted, and we are running equalities training going forward as part of our organisation development piece that we're doing with our Future of Work team. So at the moment, we're in the planning stage of that. The difference in numbers is in relation to the courses being on a more ad hoc basis. The ones like the Vowder SV, the RAP, and the safeguarding, they're all mandatory training. But what we're doing in relation to this organisation development piece across the whole authority, we're going to be rolling out equalities training. So yeah, that is something that we're going to pick up going forward.
Is that okay, Ken? Would you like to come back?
Is that going to be rolled out as, particularly with the unconscious bias, as mandatory training, or mandatory training at least to those critical staff in particular positions where it becomes a huge issue or could become a huge issue?
Can I pass that to Sheena, because training isn't really my area. I know about the organisation development piece. Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Sheena, are you able to come in on that one, please?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Diane. So in terms of the unconscious bias training, at the moment, that is specifically directed towards managers who've got responsibility for recruitment. As Diane says, we are looking at the wider rollout of qualities training across the workforce, and we've got an ambition. We're always ambitious, aren't we? In Neath Talbot, so we've got ambitions around becoming an anti-racist organisation, so an anti-racist employer. We've established the Ethnic Minority Employee Network earlier this year. And our plan is to establish other employee networks. So on the previous point that you raised, Councillor Phillips, we are looking at establishing an LGBT forum. We're thinking about a forum for employees with disabilities. And those are ways in which we hope that we can gain more confidence across the workforce and all parts of our workforce. And we hope that we can become more inclusive. In terms of the training that goes alongside that, that's something that we're talking about in the Equalities and Community Cohesion Group, which is chaired by Councillor Noyle. But with reference to, so at the moment with reference to the Ethnic Minority Forum, but we hope to pull in other employee networks to that, so we can also reference to them. And when it comes to training, we want that training to have tangible outcomes. So one of the things we're thinking about at the moment is how we reach a diverse and distributed workforce in terms of training, how you make that training meaningful, and how you make sure that that training has the right kind of outcomes. So our training in the past has tended to be a little defensive, and that's not a Neath Talbot thing. I think culturally across the UK, when organisations have rolled out equalities training, it's been about how not to get sued. And actually, we want to do something that, as you say, makes a cultural difference. So something that means that all our employees can show up to work, that they can be themselves, that they may not want to tick the prefer not to say box, and actually will be quite happy to declare who they are, what they are. So that's our ambition anyway. I hope that answers your question. Quite a long-winded answer. So I think in short, we're probably not there yet, but it's certainly on our radar and we've got plans around it. So we'll bring further reports to this committee and let you know what we're doing.
Is that okay, Ken?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you both for the answers.
Okay, thank you very much. Next to indicate to speak then is Councillor Carol Clement-Williams. Carol, please.
Oh, thanks, Chair. So I completely agree with Councillor Phillips, actually. I think that that those two courses should be mandatory. There's still so much going on in the newspapers, etc., about inequalities and big organisations, and I would hate it to happen to Neath Talbot Council, I've got to be honest with you. But more than that, it's for the outcomes. It's for everyone, every single person has unconscious bias. It's natural. But to understand that and be aware of that, I believe it should be a mandatory course. I wasn't going to pick up on that point, to be fair. Councillor Phillips has done well there. But what I would have said is a lot of the training that we were doing, especially when you've got workforce that are working all over the place and outside of centres, is CBT training, so computer-based training. You know, finding half an hour to do a computer, because, you know, even if it's just a basic course, just to, you can put a lot into half an hour, and I think it would be a good way to go. But that wasn't the point I was going to make, Chair. I've got a couple. Sorry, I'm just finding the page I've annotated. I'm having problems with my iPad. So the gender pay gap, it says the data isn't available at the moment, but it will be available in December. Wouldn't it have been better it's just a point to bring this report in December when it was complete? And then it's worrying why we have an increased number of BNME staff applying for jobs. It's page 21, yet far less people being employed. I was wondering if we've done any analysis as to why that might be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Daniel, did we take that?
I haven't done any analysis of what it might be, but we are putting things in place to try and improve it. So the first thing that we've put in place is an anonymised application form. So we've talked about unconscious bias here. So the anonymised application form, the recruiting managers can't see who is applying for the job until they've moved to the shortlisting stage. And this report is only data, so we can't see the story behind it either, because we don't know whether they're applying for jobs that they haven't got the essential criteria for. So we are working with the Neath Talbot BME Community Association, and we are going to be holding a jobs fair in January. We're linked in with them and we go into regular meetings. Swetha Callaghan, who works in the recruitment task force, she's leading this. We've already made some amendments to our recruitment website and our recruitment documentation with regards to feedback that we've had from the BME Community Association. And we are going out with a jobs fair, and Councillor Rahman is part of this. He's kind of arranging it with us so that we're going out and talking to the people in the community and asking them, you know, what barriers there may be with them applying for jobs in the council. And they may not also be aware that the council are recruiting at the moment, because, you know, Councillor Clement Williams, we've had austerity for the last 10 to 12 years. So people might not know that we are open for recruiting. So not only in this area as well, we're going to be engaging with other community associations in the Swansea area, which Councillor Rahman has got connections with. So I think I say it in the report, you know, it may not be ideal this year, but we're hoping, because we've got extra capacity in the team now with the recruitment task force, that there'll be different numbers on the reports next year, because we are doing a lot of engagement with the community association.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Can I come back on that a second?
Yeah, you can do it, yeah.
Very briefly,
Yeah.
the reason I asked was, you know, is it a language barrier, and could it be, you know, that completing the application forms was something that, because I found that over the years, completing application forms sometimes is a language unto itself, and if you know what language to use, buzzwords and things like that, it can help you when you are applying for jobs. And so that was the reason for me asking. I was certainly not criticising, and you know, a lot of work has gone into this report. So thank you to all the officers involved. Diane, you know, I do appreciate that very much. And the other thing that I forgot to mention just now was Stephanie was asking just now about the percentages of people, and I have brought that up in the past. And I have mentioned it before, but I think that people are very, they don't want to be seen or known as disabled, even if it's anonymised. They don't want to say that they're disabled. And a lot of people don't realise that they are technically or thought of as disabled if they've just got something like, say, arthritis or minor conditions, which still means that they're protected under disability law, but they may not necessarily see themselves as being disabled. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I don't think there's a question there specifically, so thank you for that, Carol. Okay, next to indicate to speak was Councillor Sean Percy. Sean, please.
Diolch, thanks, Chair. I've just got a question around the data really and how that's gathered around. We've had a bit of a discussion around people sort of ticking the prefer not to say box on some of these questions. But I'm assuming some of this data is kind of older legacy data that's kind of been sitting there for a while. Have the questions changed over time? Has everyone kind of been presented with these questions kind of in a similar format? I guess I'm just wondering whether some of the prefer not to says actually maybe were not presented the question in the same way as other people. If you kind of catch my drift, just trying to unpick that, because I'm surprised that that every single employee has completed the questionnaire. That surprises me, that there's 100% of people have actually completed that, or are we in a situation where perhaps people have completed it for someone else and not ticked the difficult boxes? So I'd be curious to kind of understand how that data has been gathered over time. If I could get a bit of an insight into that, would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Diane, thank you.
Well, there's two different ways, really, the data's gathered, Councillor Percy. The first way, where we get all our data from, is when people apply for the jobs with us. There's an equalities form that they need to complete. And then the recruiting manager doesn't see that information because it's for monitoring purposes only. So that's the main way that we get this data from job applicants. Then all the data that's reported, some of it is historical data as well. So maybe somebody started in 2010 and maybe they didn't have a disability then, but they have now, but then they haven't gone in and updated their information accordingly. So we used to always send out these forms annually, or years ago when there was plenty of capacity in the HR team in the authority. But now we rely on people going in and doing it off their own back on an annual basis. But I think I said when we had the first question, I do realise that perhaps we need to work a little bit harder at getting people to go in and update this information, because the majority of people go in every month to view their payslip. So we probably should be a little bit more proactive in putting a message on the system to say, you know, you're looking at your payslip. Can you just check that all your details that are held on employee self-service are kept up to date? So that's something that we will look at going forward. But currently, as it stands today, it's either from applicants or it's historical data. You know, some people go in and update it. I go in and update mine, and there's a lot of people who do go in and update it. But then there may be a certain percentage of people who don't. So, and I think it's tricky for job applicants because although we've got a website to show how inclusive we are and how diverse our workforce are, they still may be a little bit nervous as what type of organisation we are. But we spent a lot of time on our new website. The recruitment task force has spent a lot of time posting our jobs on different platforms that are very inclusive and diverse to try and show that that's the kind of authority that we are and that we continue to be going forward.
Thanks, Diane. Was there any to come back on that, Sean, please?
Yeah, if I just come back briefly. No, thanks for that. I think in terms of prompting staff members to sort of update the information, I think that's definitely something that I guess we need to do. It's not something that needs to be done kind of on paper or anything anymore, is it? So, you know, an annual email with a link to say, you know, please update your details seems fair. I guess I'm curious around where we've got obviously lots of employees that have been with us for a long time, you know, some of these questions being asked, I'm assuming around things like sexual orientation. You know, would we have asked that question in 1996? I'm not sure. You know, I find it a little bit hard to believe that every single employee has actually seen and answered that question. Have some of the people that have not answered it been put in the prefer not to say category? Because there's an important distinction between not answered the question and prefer not to say. And I'm just curious on that front. It's just around sort of kind of the validation of that data, because if we've been a bit ad hoc in terms of you know, following up with members of staff, I can understand now that the new employees' data will be quite robust because they've had perhaps an electronic form. But if we've got a lot of these you know, older members of staff that have been with us for a while, and it's not been mandatory for them to go in and even be prompted to ask to look at the questions, I just find it maybe a little bit unlikely we'd have 100% data for everyone. But that might just be something we can go away and have a look at.
Thanks, Sean. Dan?
It's my understanding that if they ticked prefer not to say, they would have been reported as prefer not to say. Not if they hadn't responded, we'd put them in prefer not to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I asked the question because there isn't any category to say they haven't responded, and when I added up the numbers, it adds up to our total number of staff. So it would be 100% of all of our staff have answered that question, and that just feels perhaps unlikely that there would be a handful, surely, that never got round to doing it.
Can we just have a look into that behind the scenes then and see if you can find out some more data about it, Diane, please?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, and we'll come back to you, Sean, and everybody else. The next indicator to speak from the chamber then is Councillor Peter Richards. Peter, please.
Thank you, Chair. Diane, it's about training actually, and you said you're not responsible for training, and I appreciate that, but it's coming back to what Ken said about unconscious bias. Having done a course on unconscious bias, you know, I know how important it is and what benefits it can bring. I just want to know where we are, perhaps Sheena can answer this, where we are with e-learning, because I know we've got a portal there on e-learning now, and I would have thought that would be an ideal subject for e-learning, encouraging new members again to be involved in that. And where are we with e-learning? Is there any progress on e-learning?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe Sheena.
Yeah, no problem. So Councillor Richards, we do have an e-learning platform, and the Learning, Training and Development team roll out thousands of days worth of online training every year via the platform. Rolling out unconscious bias training via the e-learning platform is certainly an option for us. We're exploring at the moment whether it's a subject that best lends itself to e-learning or face-to-face training. And we're also exploring how we reach all parts of the workforce with some of this training. So the more straightforward training is, the more it lends itself to e-learning. The more training needs discussion and reinforcement, the more it lends itself to face-to-face learning. When I say face-to-face, it doesn't actually have to be face-to-face. It can be via platforms like Teams. So we're looking creatively at it, and probably what we'll come up with is a package of training that isn't one size fits all. So the training is appropriate to the parts of the workforce that we're delivering that training to. But yes, we certainly do have a lot of training activity on our e-learning platform.
Yes, go on, Peter.
Yeah. From my experience of unconscious bias, from an e-learning perspective, it is quite workable because I've worked through the lay people. So, you know, I certainly hope the members have some involvement when they're actually putting the training packages together so that we've all got a better understanding. Okay. There's one other question.
Yeah.
It's just for clarity. On page 28, occupational areas of work, can you just explain that? I don't think it lends itself well. There's no explanation for it.
You mean in the blue at the top, do you?
Yeah.
Dan?
That's just where our employees are based, what directorates our employees are based
The
in.
bottom underneath that is quite, the percentage refers to the percentage of each directorate workforce where an employee has 2 jobs or different directorates. This counted twice. What does that mean?
It means if they've got more than one job and one's in chief execs and one's in education, they've been counted in both directorates.
Do we?
At the bottom would have been a bit.
Do we have many who have two roles, two jobs?
Yeah, a lot of people in the schools and, oh, my mic's on, and a lot of people in education, catering and cleaning services. Sometimes they're a kitchen assistant and they're a cleaner in the school. So yeah, there are quite a few, yeah.
Okay.
You know, specifically in the social services, health and housing, there's quite a high percentage there, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
What are they working across different directorates, or what does it say?
It's saying that 81% are women and 19% are male in the social services, health and housing directorate.
Work across two directorates. I might be reading it wrong.
No, sorry. I think the word what it's saying. This is just the percentage of employees in each directorate. So in chief execs is 66% female, 34% male, and that's going down there. Where the confusion lies is what they're saying is if an employee has two jobs in different directorates, they've been included in both directorates.
Stand up, but it can be misinterpreted.
Maybe we can look at that for the
Yeah.
next report. That we can
Yeah,
put forward.
definitely. Yeah.
Technology to
Yeah.
used.
Thank you, Chair.
The next to indicate is Councillor Caroline Williams. Caroline, please. Oh, I was on mute then, sorry. The next to indicate to speak is Councillor Caroline Lewis. Caroline, please.
Sorry, yes, I just want to ask a few things. I know that previously you count teachers as well, don't you, as the number of people working for Neath Talbot?
Sorry.
Are
Sorry,
they
I didn't hear-
included? Are they included in your numbers?
Oh yes, they are. Yeah.
Because they're not actually employed, are they? They don't get.
Yeah, they
Well,
are employed.
they are employed by the authority, but when you compare them to other authorities, they don't count them as they put it separately, don't they?
I'm not sure what other
No?
authorities do, but
Oh, right, okay.
they are counted. They are counted as employees.
Right.
They've got a strange relationship in employment law terms because
Yes.
the governing body is the employer, but they are covered in the numbers in our report here.
Right, okay, because I don't think all authorities count their teachers, do they, as number of people working for the authority. I'm not sure, maybe I can check that. I just, when you mentioned about setting up groups previously for, diversity reasons, I think sometimes we got to look at what we all have in common and not look at what makes us all different, because quite often it can be divisive sometimes, I feel. I think we need to bring people together more and look at what we do have in common instead of definitely looking at our differences. That's a bit of a concern for me, and it might seem odd, but I do have concerns about young white males getting jobs. If you look at big organisations, they have lots of groups for different needs, but we often forget about the white male, and I think it's something we need to look at moving forward. And when it comes to jobs, because there's an awful lot of white males not getting jobs at the minute or being promoted higher up the ranks. It seems to be a lot of women, and that's a big concern for me. And the iTrent, I worked in a school for many years, and when it went from your payslip being paid, when you were posted a payslip and when it went on to iTrent, there was a large percentage of staff that never looked at their payslips. So I'd be curious how many do actually check their payslips and how many actually know how to do it. Can you tell if people have logged on to their payslips or onto the iTrent?
No, we can't tell, but what I can tell you is we've got a dedicated inbox for iTrent queries, and we are receiving a lot of queries from our teaching workforce, especially, the teaching assistants and the teachers for updates on how to actually access the system. So we've had iTrent for a year now, and we've done lots of communication, especially with our schools employees. We have working groups with bursars and PSOs. we can't tell when they've logged in, but based on the contact that we're having with teachers and teaching assistants, not only via the iTrend inbox, but via telephone calls, that they are logging in.
All right, okay, that's good to know. Okay, thank you.
Is that right, Caroline, please?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Sheena, you popped your hand up to come back in then, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to address a couple of points that Councillor Lewis has raised there. So in terms of the picture of the organisation that you have in terms of the gender equality breakdown, Neath Talbot is 70% female as an organisation. So if you're seeing more women being promoted, to be honest, that's music to my ears, because that actually shows that our recruitment processes are working as they should be. We should see more women being promoted because there are more women in our workplace. What you will see is that the majority of people in our lowest pay grade are overwhelmingly female. So it's off the top of my head, I'm going to say it's 97% female in our lowest pay grade. One of the key ways in which we can actually eliminate our gender pay gap is actually by encouraging our low paid women to access promotion. So one of the initiatives that we've embarked on is a mentoring scheme with Chwarae Teg. So Chwarae Teg are the gender campaigning organisation that we work in partnership with to eliminate our gender pay gap. Now the mentoring scheme, whilst we've embarked on the mentoring scheme specifically to support our lowest paid woman out of the lowest pay grade, we are actually going to open it up to all employees. So it's not going to be exclusive to women. Men will be able to access it as well, and people at all levels in the organisation will be able to access it. So we've been training our mentors. Last week, those cohort of mentors went through the training. There's another cohort going through it next week. And then we'll be going out asking for mentees to come forward who've been matched to the mentors. And that's really aimed at progression within the workforce, not specifically for one gender or the other, but we do need to do something about our gender pay gap specifically. In terms of people who aren't employed within the workforce, one of the things learning, training and development focus on is apprenticeships into the organisation. So that's a really good way of young people accessing their first taste of employment. So through a structured employment training scheme. And the Learning, Training and Development team also support work experience placements for lots of different groups of people, but targeted at people who need to access the workplace. Perhaps they've been out of the workplace for a long period of time, or perhaps they've never been in the workplace. So that's can be a really beneficial experience for people. And what we do see is that many of our apprentices, many of our trainees and people on work experience placements end up accessing other employment within the council. So that's a really positive thing. In terms of employee groups, before we established the Ethnic Minority Employee Network, we were very careful to speak to employees from ethnic minority backgrounds to ask them what it is they wanted. So they gave us feedback on what it was like to be an employee from an ethnic minority background within our workplaces. And some of the things they told us were really difficult to hear. They told us about experiences that weren't great. And they decided basically that they would like an employee network. We've spent quite a lot of time talking to them about what that network will look like. We've been fortunate to have support from Unison's Black member, Wales officer, who supported us in establishing the network. And that network now is becoming more self-sufficient, is needing less support from us, and it is finding its own voice. So feeding back to the council what it's like to be an ethnic minority employee, and in a very positive and constructive way. So trying to provide better opportunities for other ethnic minorities within our workplace. And I think that would be our approach in terms of setting up other groups. We won't set the groups up for the sake of setting the groups up and saying, oh, we've got a nice shiny badge, we've got this network, aren't we marvelous? We'll be setting it up because the employees affected by the particular issue think there is a benefit to them in setting it up, and we'll be setting it up so it makes a difference. So it's not about setting people apart. Hopefully it's about creating a more inclusive workforce. So that's the aim behind it. I do appreciate the comment though, because you know, we do need to think differently about how we include people. You know, it's certainly a point of view, and it's something that we need to think about, as well as having the employee networks, how we make sure we are becoming a truly inclusive employer. So I'm sure there are other things that we can be doing as well as the networks.
Brilliant, that's good to hear, because sometimes it can be that everyone's split up into different groups and then we don't come together, so it's great to hear that. Brilliant, thank you.
Great, thank you, Sheena. We've got one more indication on this one, and it's Councillor Tim Bowen with the Christmas jumper on.
Yeah, lovely, Chair. Thank you, Chair. It's just one question. We've got a number of people at the top of their pay grade. They're asked to do more and more work, but without getting rewarded for it, because they can't move anywhere else. Is this something we'd be looking into to increase, you know, a pay grade in certain places?
You want me to take that, Tan?
Yes, please, Sheena, if you would.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think the key thing that what we're trying to encourage within our workforce is progression. So that's one key way in which people can increase their pay is through career development. So potentially moving up to the next level within that particular career. We're also thinking about how we can creatively plug some of our skills gaps. So we know we've got skills gaps in some key areas. We're recruiting more people than we've ever recruited before. So we've practically doubled our recruitment intake at the moment. The team are working phenomenally hard. But there are still some areas where there's national skills shortages. So that's one thing we're thinking about, is where we've got people in the workforce who want to progress, but perhaps who aren't able to for whatever reason, is can we match them with our skills gaps and make some kind of link there, and wrap learning, training and development around them to help them progress. In terms of, are we going to create additional pay grades? The last personnel committee, you approved the strategic manager pay grade. So that's an additional pay grade that we've created at the top, just above the Green Book pay and grading structure. It's not really designed for us to create lots and lots of jobs at that level, so then everybody else shuffles upwards. That wasn't really the aim behind that. They're creating that pay grade, and when you've got incremental pay progression, at some point you reach the top of the pay scale. So as an employer with a pay and grading structure that we need to equality proof, it's not really open to us to start adding on to the top of every pay scale so people feel that they're getting additional pay. I think the key thing that we can do for people is ensure they're getting the training and development, ensure they've got access to career progression. To me, that makes more sense, and try and link them to our skills gaps. So does that answer your question, Councillor Bowen?
Yeah, what I'm saying is there's a lot of departments that are at the, you know, the maximum, but there's people in that, you know, that group that at the top, they can't move on, but they're still expected to do lots more work, and they're not getting rewarded for it.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I missed the point about them being expected to do lots more work. We certainly wouldn't. So there's a difference between being given additional responsibility So if they were being given additional responsibility, then what we would expect to see is that their jobs are being re-evaluated. So they're going back through job evaluation to see if the additional responsibility warrants a higher level of pay. That's really important. If they're being asked to do more of the same, then that isn't going to result in extra responsibility that warrants an additional pay grade, but there are other pay policies that may apply. So for instance, the honorarium scheme is designed to reward employees who've been asked to take on onerous duties on top of their current job. So there are things that we can do to reward people. If there's particular examples that you wanted to pass on to me, Councillor Bowen, you can always do that outside the meeting, and I can have a look at them for you if you wanted me to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and that's it for the number of indications on this one then. So thank you to everybody who's contributed to this section. So I now refer to members to the recommendation on page 10 of the report pack. If I could, I will propose if I could have a seconder, please.
Second.
Thank you very much. Tim, if you pop your hand down on the screen a minute, please.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. There we are. So members, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your hand, I will assume that you're in favour of the recommendation. Sarah, will you please confirm if the report has been approved or not?
I see no indication to the contrary, Chair, and I can confirm the report is now approved.
Thank you very much. And we move on to agenda item 5. One sec. Agenda item 5 is the report of the head of people amendment to the establishment change process. And Diane, please.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got anything to add to the report, but again, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, members, if there are any questions, if you can pop your hand up, please. First one to note to indicate is Councillor Carol Clement Williams. Carol, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I can understand about saving members' time and officer time, but as a cabinet member, I would at least like to be aware of what was going on. So maybe they have to physically sign a form at the moment. I've got no problem with sort of not signing a physical form, but would they then be made aware of changes within their directorates? Because I found as a cabinet member, it's good to know when things are changing. Apart from anything else, you don't look silly if you're in a meeting and you don't know what's going on in your own directorate. So are there plans to sort of, it gets signed off, but then they are cited on the changes?
Yeah.
The section that's going to be amended is for the smaller minor changes. Anything that's of a significant change that may be a big structural change or may result in people being at risk, that remains unchanged, so that would have to have the cabinet member's signature. This proposal is in relation to small minor changes. For example, I've got someone in my team who's going to be increasing their hours by 4 hours after Christmas. So it's smaller changes than that we're proposing to take the cabinet members' approval out. I totally agree with you, Councillor Clement Williams. Anything that's of important nature that might, affect the structure detrimentally or affect the staff detrimentally, I think cabinet members should be involved, but these are for the smaller areas, and the proposal as it is in the report doesn't kind of build in any other kind of briefing, but I just want to kind of reassure you really that it would only be for minor amendments, not big.
I suppose this. Sorry, I suppose there's kind of like no definition of a minor change. So would a minor change mean, I think you've explained it now, but what my thinking was, would a minor change be just taking on 2 people, or would a minor change be something like what you've just said now? So just changing hours up or down, and fair enough. But if it meant extra employment, extra money and things like that, then I would want to know about it. Thanks.
Yeah, the changes are on the form, and complete part, we say complete part 2 only if You were creating a new post, temporary or permanent or grant funded. You were deleting an existing post. You were increasing or decreasing hours in a post, or you were changing a contract type, e.g. from temporary to permanent. So that would only be for individuals. So they are small changes, and there is guidance on the report, on the establishment change form.
Okay, I did look at it. I must have missed that bit, but it's nice to have that reassurance anyway. And Chair, if you don't mind, I need to leave now. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you much for coming along and letting us know that as well. Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Thank you. And next to indicate the speaker is Councillor Ken Phillips. Ken, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have slight concerns over this, in that it is effectively removing a layer of monitoring and scrutiny in the way we deal with employees. And I appreciate some of this is creation of roles or deletion of roles that aren't actually occupied at the time and all the rest of it, and that this is minor changes. But every time we address minor changes like changes in hours and so on, we are dealing with real people here. And this comes back for me to the issue we spoke about unconscious bias and the potential for issues to occur in these minor changes around, you know, who gets to increase their hours and so on, that we have decisions being made with one less layer of oversight, where potentially we don't have at the moment an absolute requirement that the people making those decisions have undertaken, successfully undertaken the equalities and unconscious bias training that give us a level of, you know, security over how those decisions are being made and whether they're being made properly. I also take on board what Councillor Clement Williams previously said about you know, the reporting back on decisions that are made via this process. And there seems to be a sort of, you know, we're removing a layer without putting any safety elements in.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, the actual manager who makes the change, it has to be approved by the head of service, or the sponsoring head of service, and it does have to be approved by the group accountant to make sure that there is a budget there. But so it's not just one person acting unilaterally. There are two other levels of check that goes on in relation to it.
Ken, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I appreciate there are several people, but if none of those people or only some of those people have undertaken the proper equalities and unconscious bias training to be making these decisions, then you know, the same problem exists no matter how many of them there are. I really have concerns that we don't have any sort of compulsory, we don't seem to have, as far as I'm aware, at least, any compulsory system under which every single person making such decisions would have to have undertaken and passed the relevant training in order to do so.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Sheena's got her hand up. Maybe I could ask at this point as well, where the necessity to take Part 2 out has arisen from as well, please.
Yeah, it's from the actual managers completing the forms. They think that it's because the changes are so minor, they think that they're wasting the cabinet members' time running it past them. So that's particularly the feedback that we've had from the actual managers completing the form and the heads of service. So.
And I can understand that perhaps from a manager's perspective. As a cabinet member, I guess I would probably be saying I would like to be kept in the loop of everything, perhaps. You talked about one member of staff going to be up in her hours by 4 hours. That clearly will have an impact on our budgets, which comes under me. So I would have liked to have known that one, for example. So maybe we'll bring Sheena in and see what she says at this point then. Sheena, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sorry that somehow we've given the impression this afternoon that none of our managers have had any sort of training in terms of equality. So our managers who are decision makers have to undergo the integrated impact assessment training, and we've had several sessions of that over the years. Our accountable managers have just undergone a one-day workshop in relation to integrated impact assessments. So whenever they are making decisions, whether it's in relation to employment or in relation to service delivery, they are required to complete an integrated impact assessment, and they are required to consider the equality impact as part of that assessment. And we've also run quite a lot of equalities training over the years. So the specific data that you looked at earlier on was in relation to unconscious bias training. We have delivered sessions of unconscious bias training. What we haven't done yet is deliver it to every employee across the council. So that's really what we haven't done. But a lot of our managers have undertaken unconscious bias. They've undertaken general equalities training. They've undertaken integrated impact assessment training. And we're not a council so we monitor our grievances, our discrimination claims. We don't have a track record of complaints around this area, so our decisions aren't ending up in complaints in relation to bias or discrimination. So I just wanted to give you that reassurance. One thing we could do is potentially copy the establishment control forms to cabinet members. I think, as well as our accountable managers feeling that they're potentially wasting cabinet members' time, and some of that has come, I believe, from feedback that the accountable managers have had themselves. But it's also about the speediness of our decision making. So we want to be an agile and flexible employer. So some of it is around speed of decision making. What we could do is copy the forms to cabinet members, if that would give you greater assurance. Or if you're not happy to proceed with this proposal at this stage, we can always carry on as we are and come back at a later date, if that would give you more assurance once we've rolled out the unconscious bias training across the workforce.
Thank you, Sheena. I think from my perspective, as a cabinet member and somebody who would be involved in this, taking on board what Ken has said and what you have just said, I think I would like to possibly, if we can, make an amendment to that recommendation that does say, so it would be, if we can do this or not, I'll obviously take direction from the left. It is recommended that members approve the amendment to the establishment change process in relation to minor changes to the structures, but that all decisions are copied into the relevant cabinet member where appropriate. If that is something we can do. Ken, does that sound like it would be palatable to you?
I would like to add to that a requirement that everybody within the decision-making process, if it isn't to be directly signed off by the cabinet member, that everybody within the decision-making process must have undertaken the unconscious bias and equality training.
Okay, I think there's two exercises there. Then one is to do that exercise to see if all of those managers, where applicable, have had that training. Sheena, Diane, and if that is the case, to add that to the amended recommendation, and if we can put an amended recommendation forward today or not. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we can amend the recommendation. So if I can just get the form of wording, please. The specific form of wording to note on the report, and then if we can get a proposer and seconder then to approve that, please.
Okay, Ken, your additional item in relation to making sure that all accountable managers and heads of service and the like have received the necessary and relevant training. Do you see that as being part of the recommendation, or something that an exercise that Diane and Sheena can do alongside this?
I would prefer it to be part of the recommendation. I think it's essentially a condition on the recommendation that they can only do it if they've had the right training to do it.
Okay, so the amended recommendation would read something like, it is recommended that members approve the amendment to the establishment change process in relation to minor changes to structures, so long as the relevant cabinet member is copied in and the senior managers have undertaken the necessary and relevant unconscious bias and other training that may be required. Don't ask me to say that again. Okay. I think Sarah's going to try and type something into the chat function. If everybody can just have a look at that at the minute. Yes, we're not seeking, we're going to take the approval off the member, but that they are kept in the loop. But the senior managers will have undertaken that necessary training. Sheena, is that okay with you as leader of HR? Leader of HR, it's not director, no, you're not even director. What are you? What is your head of service?
Yes, head of service. Thank you for that job title change. Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Sarah will type something up into the chat now. That. Apologies for this, all members of the committee. Specific training. Specific training. So Sarah has typed that up into the chat there. So the recommendation would now read, is recommended that members approve the amendment to the establishment change process in relation to changes to structures with relevant cabinet members copied into the establishment change form, and the relevant senior manager has undertaken specific equalities training. Ken?
Yeah, I would prefer it to read as specific equalities and unconscious bias training to make it clear.
Yeah. So undertaking specific equalities and unconscious bias training. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah will need to retype that up and pull it forward. But those formal words will be the recommendation then. So and they will be referred to within the minutes when we receive those. Ken, please, I would ask that you check that when you receive a copy of the minutes to be sure that you're comfortable with that, which we will approve at the next meeting, of course. If I propose that amendment, could I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you just pop the chat back out on the screen, please, Sarah, if that's okay? That's okay. Okay, so members, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your hand, I will assume that you're in favour of the recommendation. Sarah, would you please confirm if the report has been approved or not?
Thank you, Chair. I see no indication and I can confirm that the amendment to the recommendation has now been approved for the report.
Brilliant, thank you. So we move on to agenda item 6. This is the Reasonable Adjustments Disability Passports Report. The report is on pages 59 to 90 of the circulated agenda pack and is here for decision. Officers taking this one. This was Diane. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've nothing to add to the report, but again, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Are there any questions from members on this report, please? Okay, I do not see any. So I now refer the members to the recommendation of page 62 of the report pack. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you, Peter. And was that Stephanie, was it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. So, members, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your hand, I will assume you're in favour of the recommendation. Sarah, would you please confirm if the report has been approved or not?
Thank you, Chair. I see no indication. I can confirm the recommendation report is approved.
Move on to agenda item 7. Thank you, Sarah. An item on agenda item 7 is the Employer Supported Policing Report. The report is on pages 91 to 114 of the circulated report back and is here for decision. Who's taking this one, please? Diane again, thank you.
Nothing
Chair.
to add to the report. Oh.
Excuse me, sorry. I know the person who's put this in. Do I need to do a declaration of interest?
Sorry, can you say that again? If you put yourself on screen so we can see you as well.
Sorry.
I
know the person that's actually put this in to be proposed. Do I have to make a declaration of interest?
Yes, you will. I think Sarah will forward the necessary forms and for you to complete afterwards.
Yeah, I will. I'll email you the form to complete, Councillor Bowen, if you could fill that out and then return to me as soon as possible, please.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so back to Diane.
Thank you, Chair. I've nothing to add to the report, but again, happy to take any questions.
Okay, Tim, is that a legacy hand in relation to the last question, or do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, keep forgetting to put it down. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other member questions on this agenda item, please?
No, I see no indication, Chair.
Thank you very much. I now refer members to the recommendation on page 94 of the report. I propose, and could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Richards. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your hand, I will assume that you're in favour of the recommendation. Sarah, will you please confirm if the report has been approved or not?
I see no indication to the contrary, Chair, and I can confirm the recommendation and report is approved.
Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item 8, which is the AMHP allowance report. Report is on pages 115 to 150 of the circulated agenda pack and is here for decision. Officers, do you have any further to add? I think, is it Councillor Lisa Morris is taking this one. Lisa, please.
Hi, no, I've nothing more to add to the report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions? I don't see any. Okay, therefore, I now refer members to the recommendation on page 121 of the report pack. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I move, Chair. Dennis Keogh.
Are you okay to second that? We had a mover from the chamber, Dennis, and Councillor Richards. You okay to second it?
Yes, okay, fine.
Thank you very much. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your hand, I will assume that you're in favour of the recommendation. Sarah, will you please confirm if the report has been approved or not?
I see no indication to the contrary, Chair, and I can confirm the recommendation and a report is approved.
Thank you very much. Next is agenda item 9, Workforce Information Pack. This report is on pages 151 to 168 of the circulated agenda pack and is here for information. Do officers have anything further to add?
No, thank you, Chair, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sheena. Do members have any questions? Don't see any. There are no recommendations other than members note this for information. So we now move on to agenda item 10, which is access to meetings, that we need to move into private section. So pursuant to section 100A 4 and 5 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public shall be excluded for the following items of business which involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 15 of part 4 of schedule 12A of the Act. I propose, could I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair Neath Jenkins.
Thank you, and Councillor Richards as well. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your electronic hand, I will assume you're in favour of moving into private session. Sarah will confirm, please, that the recording is stopped